Hey there! Tonight we're going to explore one of the most tragic and haunting stories in all of the lands between. This is the tale of a goddess who became a prison, of two souls trapped in one body, of a being who shattered herself to escape a fate worse than death. This is the story of Marika the Eternal and Radagon of the Golden Order, and the question that haunts everyone who learns their secret. Were they always one person, or did they become one against their will? Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment and let me know what corner of the world you're drifting off in. It's always comforting to know there are others out there, sharing these quiet moments together, letting these dark tales carry us into sleep. Now, settle in, get comfortable, pull your blankets close and let the world outside fade away. Because the story of Marika and Radagon is one that will make you question everything you thought you knew about identity, about free will, about what it means to be yourself. It's a story about power that becomes a cage, about divinity that destroys everything human, about a goddess who broke the world just to break free from the chains she had forged for herself. In the shattered world of the lands between, at the heart of the golden Erdtree, there hangs a figure crucified on divine light. If you journey to that sacred place, if you burn your way through thorns and face down champions and overcome every obstacle the world throws at you, you'll find her there. Queen Marika the Eternal, vessel of the Elden Ring, goddess of the lands between, imprisoned within the very tree she caused to grow. Her body is broken, shattered like the ring she once bore. She hangs there motionless, silent, seemingly lifeless. But approach her, and something impossible happens. The golden hair darkens to crimson red. The feminine form shifts and changes. The goddess becomes a god. Marika transforms into Radagon, and Radagon takes up a hammer, and that hammer comes crashing down with the force of divine fury. Because Radagon, unlike Marika, is still loyal to the Golden Order, still devoted to the Elden Ring, still determined to protect what remained of the world Marika tried to destroy. This is the central mystery, the core horror at the heart of Elden Ring's lore. Two beings, two personalities, two sets of goals and dreams and fears, all trapped within a single body. Marika, who came to hate the god she had become, and Radagon, who remained faithful to the very end, both imprisoned by the greater will as punishment for what Marika did, both paying the price for a crime only one of them committed. But to understand how they came to this state, to comprehend the tragedy of what they became, we need to go back to before there was an Erdtree, back to before the Golden Order ruled the lands between, back to a small, quiet village hidden in a place that no longer appears on any map. We need to go back to the beginning, to a time when Marika was not a goddess but simply a girl whose people would be massacred, a girl who would witness horrors that would shape everything she became, a girl who would one day break the world rather than continue living in chains. Chapter 1: The Shaman Village. There is a place in the land of shadow, hidden behind barriers and guarded by sentinels, that most who wander the lands between will never see. It requires knowing secrets, performing specific gestures, unlocking pathways that were meant to stay sealed. This place is called the Shaman Village, and it is the most peaceful, most haunting location in all of Elden Ring. No enemies patrol its streets, no monsters lurk in its buildings. There is only silence, golden light, and flowers. So many flowers blooming in colours that seem almost too vibrant, too alive, as if trying to make up for all the death that occurred here. This was Marika's home, this tiny hamlet of just a few cobblestone houses nestled among lush vegetation and warmed by the gentle light of a minor Erdtree that Marika herself would plant long after everyone was gone. At the village's highest point stands an old tree containing a statue of a silver-haired maiden. If you explore carefully, you can find a single golden braid of hair, left as an offering to a grandmother figure entombed within that tree. This braid belonged to Marika. It's one of the last pieces of her that remained human, that remained connected to who she was before everything changed. The people who lived here were called shamans, though they were of the Numen race, a people said to have come from somewhere beyond the lands between. Long-lived, seldom born, mysterious in their origins and their nature. But whatever else they were, the shamans of this village were peaceful. They were not warriors, they were not conquerors. They were simply people trying to live their lives in a dangerous world, trying to survive in a land that was ruled by others, by the Hornsent. The Hornsent were the dominant civilization in the Land of Shadow during this time. They were spiritually connected to something called the Primordial Crucible, an ancient source of life energy that predated the Erdtree, predated the Elden Ring itself. The Hornsent venerated those born with physical mutations, with horns and tails and other characteristics that showed the Crucible's blessing. They believed that flesh was sacred, that bodies could be moulded and merged and transformed into something greater. They believed that through their rituals they could create saints, and the shamans, Marika's people, had a unique property that made them valuable to the Hornsent's twisted experiments. The flesh of shamans, you see, was said to meld harmoniously with others. Their bodies could be combined, grafted, merged in ways that other flesh could not. This wasn't something the shamans chose. It wasn't a gift they offered willingly. It was simply how they were, a fundamental aspect of their physiology. And the Hornsent saw this property and decided it made the shamans perfect for their jar rituals. If you explore the Land of Shadow, if you venture into places like Belurat Jail or Bonnie Village, you'll find these jars, living jars. They're called, though there's nothing truly living about what's inside. You'll find mutilated prisoners with flesh twisted into shapes that flesh was never meant to take. You'll find creatures that were once human, now transformed into monstrous fleshy amalgamations stuffed into ceramic vessels. These are the results of the Hornsent's rituals, their attempts to create saints by melding flesh together, by forcing bodies to merge and become something new. And the shamans were taken for this purpose, stolen away from their homes, spirited to the Hornsent villages, carved up and stuffed into jars in rituals that were supposed to transform them into divine beings. A phantom in Bonnie Village still speaks, centuries or millennia later, still repeating words that must have been said to countless shamans. For pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nice sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone. Imagine hearing those words as you're dragged to your death. Imagine being told that your entire purpose, your entire reason for existing, is to be cut into pieces and stuffed into a jar in the vain hope that you might merge with other bodies and become something holy. Imagine watching your family, your friends, Your neighbours disappear one by one, taken by the Hornsent for their barbaric experiments. Imagine being a child in this village, growing up knowing that at any moment you might be next. This was Marika's childhood. This was the world that shaped her. The Shaman Village, which should have been a place of safety and community, became a place of terror and loss. One by one, the people disappeared. One by one, the houses emptied. The Hornsent came and took them, spirited them away to their jar rituals, and those who were taken never returned. How Marika escaped this fate, we don't know for certain. Perhaps she was simply lucky, overlooked in one of the raids. Perhaps someone hid her, sacrificed themselves to keep her safe. Perhaps she fled into the wilderness and survived through sheer determination. But somehow, Marika survived when so many others did not. Somehow, she lived through the massacre of her people, watched her entire civilization disappear into the jars of the Hornsent, and she remembered. By all the gods, she remembered every moment of it. The fear, the helplessness, the knowledge that she came from a people who were seen as nothing more than raw materials for someone else's religious experiments. This trauma, this fundamental violation, would define everything Marika became. Every decision she made as a goddess, every war she waged, every cruelty she inflicted can be traced back to this small village and what the Hornsent did here. There's an incantation you can find in the game called Minor Erdtree. Its description reads, Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. This was her only act of mercy for her people. She returned long after she had become a goddess, long after she had claimed the power to reshape reality itself. She returned to this empty village and planted a tree that would bathe it in healing golden light. But there was no one left to heal, no one left to save. She could only offer comfort to ghosts, a benediction for the dead, a golden shroud for a home that existed now only as a memorial. The Shaman Village stands as a testament to where Marika came from, to the suffering that forged her into what she would become. It's protected by 2 tree sentinels, powerful knights who guard the approach. These sentinels were likely placed there by Marika herself, or by her son Mesmer acting on her orders, not to keep people out but to keep the secret in, to ensure that no one would learn about this place, about the humble, tragic origins of the goddess who ruled the world. Because a goddess born from such suffering, a god who came from such humble and violated beginnings, was not the image Marika wanted the world to see. Chapter 2: The Gate of Divinity. Marika's survival was only the beginning of her story. She was a lone shaman in a world ruled by those who had destroyed her people. She had nothing, no family, no home, no power to protect herself if the Hornsent decided they wanted one more body for their jars. But Marika had something that few possessed. She was an Empyrean. Empyreans are rare beings chosen by forces beyond mortal comprehension as potential vessels for divine power. They are candidates for godhood, individuals with the capacity to hold the Elden ring within their bodies and become the avatar through which cosmic entities can reshape reality. It's unclear whether Marika was born an Empyrean or became one through some unknown process. But at some point she was recognized by the Two Fingers, those strange emissaries that claimed to speak for the greater will, and she was marked as one with the potential to ascend, and ascend she did. Though the details are shrouded in mystery and subject to interpretation, We know that Marika walked a path that led to Inerim, a floating tower city in the sky above the land of shadow. At the peak of this tower stood the Gate of Divinity, a portal constructed from countless bodies melded together, flesh woven into a doorway through which mortals might pass to become something more, something terrible. The Gate of Divinity is one of the most disturbing sights in all of Elden Ring. It's not stone or metal or wood, it's flesh, human flesh. Bodies twisted and merged together, preserved in some half-living state, their faces frozen in expressions that might be agony, or might be ecstasy, or might be something beyond human comprehension. The Hornsent built this gate. They constructed it using the same techniques they had used on Marika's people, melding flesh with flesh, creating a portal from the bodies of those they had sacrificed, and Marika walked through it. Think about what that meant. To achieve godhood, to gain the power she needed to survive, and to ensure nothing like what happened to her people could happen again. Marika had to walk through a gate built from the flesh of beings who had suffered as her people suffered. She had to use the Hornsent's own twisted creation, had to benefit from their barbaric practices, had to pass through a doorway of meat to reach divinity on the other side. What did she think about as she approached that gate? Did she see the faces in the flesh and recognize some of them? Wonder if any of her people were woven into this monstrosity? Did she hate herself for using it, for allowing her ascension to be accomplished through the very practices that had destroyed everything she loved? Or had she already hardened her heart, already decided that no price was too high if it meant gaining the power to destroy those who had harmed her? On the other side of that gate waited the Elden Ring, or perhaps more accurately, waited the Elden Beast, the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring, the living avatar of the cosmic entity called the Greater Will. This creature, which resembles a massive starry dragon made of golden light, had been sent to the lands between long ago as a golden star. It possessed the power to reshape the fundamental laws of reality, to determine who lived and died, to control the very nature of existence itself. And it was looking for a vessel, a body that could contain it, an Empyrean who could become its avatar and enact its will upon the world. Marika accepted this role. She allowed the Elden Beast, and by extension the Elden Ring, to merge with her body. This was not a simple possession. The Elden Ring didn't just live inside her, it became part of her, woven into her very being. She became the vessel through which the Greater Will's power would flow into the world. She became the living embodiment of a cosmic entity's desire to bring order to chaos. And with this merger came power, unimaginable power. The power to create the Erdtree, a massive golden tree that would become the center of her new order. The power to remove death itself from the world, sealing away the rune of death so that those blessed by her grace would live forever. The power to reshape the laws of nature, to determine what was possible and impossible, to build a civilization according to her vision. But power always comes with a price, and the price Marika paid was her freedom. As the vessel of the Elden Ring, Marika was bound to the Greater Will's purpose. She wasn't simply a goddess with divine power to use as she pleased. She was a conduit, a channel through which another entity's will would be enacted. How much agency she truly had, how many of her actions were her own choices, and how many were the Greater Will directing her through the Elden Ring, is one of the great questions that Elden Ring leaves unanswered. What we know is this. Marika's ascension to godhood was considered an affair and a betrayal by those who witnessed it. The Hornsent who had built the Gate of Divinity had not built it for her. They had their own plans, their own candidates for godhood, their own vision of what the world should become. Marika wasn't supposed to be the one who passed through, but she did. She claimed the Elden Ring for herself. She became a goddess before their eyes, and then she burned their world to ashes. Chapter 3: The Golden Order and the Price of Victory. The Erdtree that grew from Marika's ascension was not the first great tree in the lands between. There had been another, older tree, connected to the primordial crucible that the Hornsent worshipped. Marika grafted her Erdtree onto the base of this ancient great tree, supplanting the old order with the new. The golden light of her grace replaced the chaotic vitality of the crucible. The worship of life in all its strange and mutated forms gave way to worship of perfection, of the golden ideal, of humanity unmarred by horns or tails or other deviations from the divine image. But establishing this new order required more than simply ascending to godhood. It required conquest. It required war. And Marika, who had once been helpless to stop the Hornsent from taking her people, now had the power to ensure that the Hornsent would never harm anyone again. She took a warrior named Godfrey as her consort. Godfrey was a legendary figure, a man of incredible strength and martial prowess who had once been called Waralu, a chieftain of the Badlands. Under Marika's blessing, he became the first Elden Lord, the champion who would lead her armies in the wars of conquest that would spread the Golden Order across the lands between. Together, they had 3 children: Godwyn the Golden, who would become the most celebrated demigod in the realm, and twin sons named Morgott and Morg, who were born with horns and condemned as omens, hidden away in shame beneath the capital city. With Godfrey at her side, Marika waged war against everyone who opposed her new order. Against the Storm Lord, an ancient deity of storms whose winds had once terrorized the land. Against the fire giants who dwelt in the frigid northern mountains, worshipping their own god of flame. Against the Carian royal family and their Academy of Raya Lucaria in Liurnia of the Lakes, whose moon-based sorcery represented a different path to power than Marika's golden incantations, and most of all, she waged war against the Hornsent. This was not a war of conquest or consolidation. This was genocide. This was revenge. Marika sent her son Messmer the Impaler into the Land of Shadow, with orders to exterminate the Hornsent civilization completely, to burn their cities, slaughter their people, and ensure that nothing remained of the culture that had stuffed her kin into jars. Messmer carried out these orders with terrible efficiency, his flame consuming everything, his soldiers leaving nothing but ash and ruin in their wake. But here's where things become complicated, where the horror of what Marika became starts to reveal itself. Because in destroying the Hornsent, she didn't just target those who had directly harmed her people. She targeted all Hornsent, every man, woman and child who bore horns, who showed signs of connection to the Crucible, who represented the old order that had persecuted her. The innocent and guilty alike burned in Messmer's flames, and this hatred of anything connected to the Crucible extended beyond the Hornsent. Marika's own twin sons, Morgott and Mog, were born with horns, showing signs of the very mutations that the Hornsent had venerated and that Marika had come to despise. These were her children, born of her own body, yet she had them imprisoned in sewers beneath the capital like criminals. She created omen killers, specialized hunters whose job was to slaughter others born with horns. She built a civilization where anyone marked by the Crucible's touch was seen as cursed, as less than human, as deserving of death or exile. Think about what this means. Think about the cruelty of it. Marika had been persecuted for the circumstances of her birth, for being a shaman in a world ruled by those who saw shamans as nothing but raw materials. She knew what it felt like to be treated as less than human, to be seen as something to be used rather than someone with their own value. And in response to that persecution, she created a new system of persecution, one where anyone born different, anyone who didn't fit the golden ideal, was cast out, or worse. This is one of the great tragedies of Marika's story. She became what she hated. The Hornsent had divided the world into those worthy of life, and those whose only purpose was to be sacrificed for the greater good. And Marika built a golden order that did exactly the same thing. Different criteria, different ideals of perfection, but the same fundamental cruelty, the same willingness to condemn people for circumstances beyond their control. But perhaps the most telling aspect of Marika's golden order was how she dealt with death itself. She removed the rune of death from the Elden ring and gave it to her shadow, a beast named Malekith, with orders to seal it away where no one could access it. Under the golden order, true death was impossible. Bodies could be destroyed, but souls would return to the Erdtree, be recycled through its roots, and be reborn into new forms. It was a form of immortality, a world without end, where those blessed by grace would never truly die. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A world without death, where no one has to suffer the loss of loved ones, where existence itself is eternal. But immortality has a dark side. Those who lived under the Golden Order couldn't die even when they wanted to. They couldn't end their suffering even when that suffering became unbearable. They were trapped in existence, forced to continue living no matter what horrors they experienced, because death was no longer an option. And there's another darker interpretation of why Marika removed death from the world. A goddess who fears death will never have to face judgment for her actions. A civilization where the powerful are immortal is one where the powerful can never be removed from power. By sealing away destined death, Marika ensured that her reign would be eternal, that her golden order could never be overthrown, that she and those she favoured would rule forever, while those deemed unworthy would suffer endlessly with no escape. After Godfrey helped her conquer the known world, after he defeated the last of her great enemies, Marika did something that shocked everyone who served her. She stripped Godfrey and all his warriors of the grace that marked them as blessed by the Erdtree. She made them tarnished, exiles cast out from the lands between, forced to wander distant lands far from the light of the golden tree. Godfrey, who had been her consort, who had fathered her children, who had fought and bled to establish her rule, was banished like a common criminal. Why did she do this? The answer isn't entirely clear, but there are hints in her words, echoes of instructions she left behind. She told them to grow strong in the face of death, to wage war in distant lands, to learn and adapt and become more than they were. And then, when they died, she would return their grace to them, would call them back to the lands between for some purpose she had in mind. This suggests that even this early in her reign, even when the Golden Order seemed at its height, Marika was planning something, preparing for something, building tools she might need for a future rebellion, because being the vessel of the Elden Ring was not the liberation she had hoped for. It was another prison, perhaps worse than anything she had endured before. Chapter 4: The Man with Red Hair. Radagon emerges. After Godfrey's banishment, Marika needed a new consort. The position of Elden Lord couldn't remain vacant, as it represented the partnership between the divine and the mortal, between the goddess and the world she ruled. And so a champion emerged, or was revealed, or perhaps was created. This champion's name was Radagon, and he possessed flowing red hair that he was said to despise, viewing it as a curse inherited from the giants his predecessors had fought and killed. Radagon appeared during the Leonian Wars, leading a golden host against the Carian royal family and their academy of Raya Lucaria. Rennala, the Queen of the Full Moon, led the defense with her moon-blessed knights and powerful sorcerers. The war raged back and forth, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Radagon proved himself to be a brilliant military commander and a fierce warrior, but Rennala's forces fought with equal skill and determination. The conflict ended in a stalemate, but then something unexpected happened. Radagon, who had come as a conqueror, fell in love with the woman he was supposed to defeat, and Rennala, who had every reason to hate this champion of the Golden Order, fell in love with him in return. They married, cementing peace between the Golden Order and the Carian nobility through their union. Rennala gifted Radagon a great sword to symbolize their love. Their marriage seemed happy, genuine, built on true affection rather than political necessity. Together, they had 3 children who would become some of the most important figures in the lands between. First came Rani, called the Lunar Princess, who inherited her mother's connection to the moon and dark sorcery. Then Ricard, who would become Praetor, a master of volcano-based magics, and finally Radan, who would grow to be the mightiest warrior among the demigods, so massive and powerful that he had to learn gravity magic just to continue riding his beloved horse Leonard without crushing the poor animal. During his time with Rennala, Radagon devoted himself to studying the glintstone sorcery taught at the academy. He aspired, as one item description tells us, to be complete, to master both the incantations of the Golden Order and the sorcery of Raya Lucaria, to unite in himself both paths to power, both understandings of how magic and reality functioned. He was thorough, devoted, passionate about learning everything he could, and then, after years of this seemingly happy marriage, after building a family and a life in Leonia, Radagon received a summons, or perhaps an order, or perhaps something else, something stranger and more disturbing. Marika called him back to Leyndell, to the capital of the Golden Order, to become her consort and the second Elden Lord. And Radagon obeyed. He left Rennala without warning, without explanation that we know of. He reforged the greatsword she had given him, breaking their bond, symbolically ending their marriage by destroying its symbol. He did leave her a parting gift, a great rune sealed within an amber egg that would give her the power to perfect the art of rebirth, to grant second chances to those who sought her out. But that was small comfort for a woman whose husband had abandoned her to return to the goddess who ruled them all. Rennala was left heartbroken, devastated to the point that she withdrew from ruling entirely. The academy that had once been loyal to her deposed her, locked her away in the grand library surrounded by her students, where she would spend eternity cradling the amber egg Radagon left her, performing rebirth after rebirth, trying to fill the void his departure left. Her mind, which had once been sharp enough to match wits with the greatest sorcerers, became clouded with grief and loss. And Radagon? He married Marika and became the second Elden Lord. Together they had 2 children, twins named Michaela and Malenia. Both were born cursed, a consequence of what happens when a single god produces children with itself. Michaela was cursed with eternal youth, his body frozen in childhood forever. Malenia was cursed with scarlet rot, a plague that consumed her from within, that would eventually transform her into the avatar of an outer god of decay. But here's the secret that changes everything. Here's the revelation that transforms Radagon's story from one of a man who abandoned his true love for political gain into something far stranger and more tragic. Radagon wasn't simply Marika's new consort, he was Marika. Or rather, they were each other. 2 halves of a single being, 2 personalities, 2 sets of memories, 2 distinct identities somehow existing within one divine form. This secret was hidden for a long time, kept from almost everyone in the lands between. But eventually a sculptor in Lendel discovered it while creating a statue of Radagon. This sculptor learned that Radagon is Marika, and he hid this knowledge within the statue itself. If you approach the statue and cast a spell called Law of Regression, which reveals hidden truths, the form shifts from Radagon to Marika, showing that they are one and the same. But what does that mean? How can 2 different people be one person? Were they always unified, with Radagon being an aspect of Marika that she could project separately? Or were they once 2 separate beings who were forced together by the greater will, or the Elden beast, merged into a single form against their will? The game never gives us a definitive answer, leaving us to piece together the truth from hints and implications and the tragic consequences of their dual nature. What we know for certain is this: at some point, Radagon and Marika existed separately, or appeared to exist separately. Radagon had his own life, his own relationships, his own children with a woman who genuinely loved him. But he was recalled to Marika's side, and after that, they were never seen together. When Radagon appeared, Marika did not. When Marika held court, Radagon was nowhere to be found. 2 forms, 1 body, 2 souls sharing a single vessel, and they did not always agree. This is crucial to understanding the tragedy that would follow. Marika and Radagon had different goals, different beliefs, different responses to the prison they shared. Radagon remained loyal to the Golden Order, devoted to the Elden Ring, determined to preserve and protect everything they had built. He was a faithful servant of the greater will, never questioning, never doubting, always working to maintain the system that gave their existence meaning. But Marika began to doubt, began to question, began to realize that godhood was not freedom, but another form of slavery, perhaps the worst slavery of all, because her chains were invisible, and everyone told her she should be grateful for them. Let's take a moment here, because I know this is a lot to process. This story we're telling tonight is dense with revelation and tragedy, and we're only halfway through. If you're finding value in these deep explorations of Elden Ring's darkest lore, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps other people discover these videos, helps them find their way to these nighttime stories, and if you want more content like this, more journeys into the shadowed corners of the lands between, consider subscribing to the channel. There's so much more darkness to explore together. Now, let's continue with Marika's story, with the slow realization that would eventually drive her to the most desperate act. Chapter 5. The cracks begin to show. The Golden Order at its height must have seemed eternal. The Erdtree stood at the centre of the lands between, its golden light blessing everything within sight. Death itself had been conquered, sealed away so that those who served the Order would never truly die. The demigods, Marika's children and stepchildren, ruled over various regions as powerful lords and ladies. Leyndell, the capital city, grew wealthy and mighty, its walls tall enough to withstand any assault, its knights the finest warriors in all the land. But beneath this golden perfection, something was rotting, and Marika was beginning to notice. We know from fragments scattered throughout the game that Marika left behind spoken words, echoes of her thoughts recorded in various places where she had stood and contemplated her situation. These echoes reveal a mind that was struggling with doubt, questioning everything she had built, wondering if the price of godhood had been too high. In one such echo, she speaks to her children, telling them that their strength befits a crown. But then she questions, what is it that you have inherited? If you're to be a god, you must learn what drives you to it. And most tellingly, she asks, in Marika is the vessel that harbours the Elden Ring. I want to be clear with all of you. The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, is that really the case? Think about that question. Is that really the case? From a goddess, from the divine figure that the entire civilization worships, comes this seed of doubt. Marika was questioning the very foundations of the order she had established. She was beginning to wonder if being the vessel of the Elden Ring made her a true god, or simply made her a tool being used by something greater than herself. Another echo is even more revealing. Marika speaks of learning a secret that had been hidden from her, that the Golden Order was not as perfect or as eternal as she had been led to believe. She says she learned this truth after meeting Queen Marika, which seems confusing at first until you realize she's speaking about herself in the third person, as if the person who learned this truth and the goddess Marika were two different entities. She's acknowledging this split within herself, the divide between who she is and what she has become. The truth she learned was this: the Erdtree, for all its grandeur and divine power, was mortal. It had grown from the body of a great tree that existed before it, a tree connected to the primordial crucible, and because it had grown from something mortal, it could die. The Golden Order, which was supposed to be eternal, which was supposed to transcend death itself, was built on a foundation that was fundamentally temporary. This revelation shook Marika to her core. Everything she had sacrificed, everything she had done to establish her rule, all the wars she had waged and the enemies she had destroyed, all of it was built on something that would eventually decay and fail. The immortality she had promised was a lie. The eternal age she had established would one day end, and she, the vessel of the Elden Ring, would have to watch it happen, trapped in a body that couldn't die, forced to witness the slow collapse of everything she had created. But there was something else eating at Marika, something deeper and more personal than philosophical concerns about mortality and divine nature. There was guilt. Because while she had become a goddess and established an order that claimed to bring peace and prosperity to the lands between, she had left enormous suffering in her wake. The Hornsent genocide carried out by Mesmer was perhaps the clearest example. Marika had ordered the extermination of an entire civilization, not just to punish those who had harmed her people, but to erase any trace of the culture that had preceded hers. And Mesmer, loyal to his mother beyond reason, had carried out these orders with terrible thoroughness. He burned cities, slaughtered populations, and when Marika saw what he had become in service to her revenge, she couldn't face it. She sealed him and his forces away in the land of shadow, hidden behind a veil, removed from history so that no one would know what had been done in her name. Her own children suffered under the system she created. Morgott and Mohg, born with horns, were imprisoned beneath Laendella's omens despite being demigods, despite being her sons. She created a world where anyone born marked by the Crucible was considered cursed, unworthy of the Erdtree's light. She built a civilization on the same kind of persecution that had destroyed her own people, just directed at different targets. Miquella and Malenia, her children with Radagon, were born cursed because of the impossibility of what they represented. Children produced by a single god mating with itself. Their afflictions were so severe that Miquella devoted his entire existence to finding cures, abandoning the Golden Order fundamentalism entirely in his desperate search for ways to heal his sister and himself. And Marika, despite all her power, despite being the vessel of reality-reshaping divine force, couldn't help them. She couldn't cure the curses that came from her own nature. Even her relationship with Radagon was a source of suffering. They shared a body but not a mind. They had different goals, different beliefs, different reactions to their situation. When one needed to act, the other had to cease existing temporarily. They could never truly be together, never have a conversation as two separate beings, never resolve their differences through discussion. They were prisoners of each other, trapped in a unity that neither of them had chosen or wanted. And through all of this, Marika began to understand something terrible. She realized that ascending to godhood, becoming the vessel of the Elden Ring, hadn't freed her from the persecution and suffering she had experienced as a young shaman. It had simply changed the nature of her prison. The Hornsent had seen her people as materials to be used in their rituals. The Greater Will saw her as a vessel to be used in its plans for the lands between. Different jailer, different cell, but still captivity, still a loss of agency, still a life where her purpose was determined by forces beyond her control. In the land of shadow, hidden away where most would never see it, there's an item called Marika's Mischief. It's a spell that she created, one that allows the caster to transform into an inconspicuous object to hide from enemies. The description tells us that this was a trick Marika played when she was yet young and way a god, used to hide from the horrors that stalked her village. She carried this spell with her even after ascending to godhood, perhaps as a reminder of who she had been, or perhaps because even as a goddess, she still felt the need to hide from the forces that controlled her. But you can't hide from something that lives inside you. You can't escape a prison when the prison is your own divine nature, when the bars are woven into the very essence of what you've become. And slowly, painfully, Marika came to understand that there was only one way to free herself. She would have to break the chains that bound her, even if breaking these chains meant destroying everything she had built, even if it meant shattering the world itself. Chapter 6: The Night of Black Knives. The turning point, the moment when Marika's doubts crystallized into action, came on a night that would be remembered as the Night of Black Knives. This was the night when true death returned to the lands between, when the immortality of the Golden Order was broken, when the first of the demigods died in body and soul. The victim was Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn son from her union with Godfrey. Godwyn was beloved throughout the realm, known for his kindness, his strength, his noble bearing. He had befriended the ancient dragons during the war against them, earning their respect through his honour. He was everything the Golden Order claimed to represent: powerful yet merciful, strong yet just, divine yet approachable. If there was an heir who could have continued Marika's legacy while making it something better, something truly worth preserving, it was Godwyn. And on that night, assassins came for him. These weren't ordinary killers. They were Black Knife assassins, women of the Numen race, the same people Marika herself had come from. They wielded daggers imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death, the rune that Marika had sealed away with her beast shadow Malekith. These daggers could kill even those blessed with immortality, could slay gods and demigods, could bring true ending to lives that were supposed to be eternal. Who sent these assassins? Who stole a fragment of destined death from Malekith, one of the most powerful and loyal servants Marika had? The answer, revealed through careful investigation, is Ranni the Witch. Ranni, daughter of Radagon and Rennala, had her own desperate plan. She wanted to free herself from the destiny mapped out for her as an Empyrean, wanted to escape the fate of becoming a vessel for the Elden Ring like her stepmother Marika. And the only way to do that was to die. But not just die physically, because the Golden Order would simply recycle her soul back through the Erdtree. She needed to die in soul while keeping her body dead, or die in body while keeping her soul alive. She needed destined death. So Ranni orchestrated a double assassination. On the same night, 2 demigods would be killed with blades imbued with the Rune of Death. Godwyn would be killed in body but not in soul, his physical form slain but his essence trapped in a state between life and death. And Ranni herself would be killed in soul but not in body, her spirit separated from her flesh, free to inhabit other vessels while her body remained a corpse. This was the Night of Black Knives, and it succeeded. Godwyn died, or half died, his body transforming into something horrible, a death-root spreading monstrosity that would corrupt everything it touched. Ranni's body died while her soul escaped into a doll, beginning her own journey toward creating an age where the Golden Order would have no power. But here's the crucial question. Did Marika know? Did she approve of this plan? Was she perhaps even involved in arranging it? The evidence suggests yes. The Black Knife assassins were Numen, Marika's own people. The fragment of destined death had to be stolen from Malekith, Marika's own beast shadow, who was bound to obey her will above all others. Would he have allowed the rune to be taken without Marika's permission, without her directing him to look the other way? It seems unlikely. And there's a statue in the game that shows Marika holding a young child who resembles Rani, suggesting a connection between them, a relationship that might have led to cooperation in this desperate plan. If Marika was involved, if she helped arrange the death of her own beloved son, then we have to ask why. Why would a mother orchestrate the murder of her most perfect child, the demigod who represented the best of what she had tried to create? The answer is terrible in its logic. Godwyn's death would prove that the Golden Order was not eternal, that the immortality it promised was a lie. His death would shatter the illusion of divine perfection. His death would break the faith that kept the system running. And perhaps most importantly, his death would give Marika the justification she needed for what she was about to do. Because a system that couldn't even protect her most beloved son, a golden order that allowed assassins to strike at the heart of Leyndell and kill a demigod in his own home, that was a system that had failed. That was an order that deserved to be destroyed. When Marika learned of Godwyn's death, when she saw what had become of him, something inside her broke. Not the sudden breaking of a dam, but the final crack in something that had been fracturing for years. All her doubts, all her guilt, all her rage at being trapped as the vessel for the greater will's ambitions, it all came together in this moment of unbearable grief. And she made a decision. She would free herself. She would end this. She would shatter the very ring that gave her power, even knowing what the consequences would be, even knowing that it would break the world, even knowing that it would condemn the lands between to an era of endless war and suffering, because she had been suffering for centuries, millennia perhaps, and she could not endure it anymore. She could not continue to be the vessel for a system that demanded such cruelty, that asked such sacrifices, that turned gods into prisoners and blessed immortals into monsters. In the words carved into stone in the lands between, we find one of Marika's final proclamations. Hear me, demigods, my children beloved. Make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices. This was her permission, her final gift to her children, the freedom to become whatever they chose, with the understanding that freedom meant risk, meant the possibility of failure and destruction. She was telling them that she would no longer maintain the Golden Order, would no longer enforce the system that kept everything in static perfection. They would have to find their own way, define their own purpose, create their own meaning, and if they failed, then they would simply end. No resurrection through the Erdtree, no divine intervention to save them, just mortality, just consequence, just the harsh reality of existence without a goddess watching over them. And then she took up a hammer, and she struck the Elden Ring, and she shattered it. Chapter 7, The Shattering. When a goddess broke the world. Picture the moment. Marika, queen of the lands between, vessel of the Elden Ring, goddess worshipped by millions, standing before the very source of her power. The Elden Ring, that golden circle of interwoven runes that defined the laws of reality, that determined what was possible and impossible, that kept death sealed and the world ordered and her trapped in divinity. She raises a hammer, perhaps the same hammer she had used to build her empire, and she brings it crashing down. The ring shatters, not cleanly, not into a handful of large pieces that could be easily gathered and repaired. It shatters into countless fragments, great runes scattered across the lands between, each one containing a portion of the divine power that once made the whole. The fundamental laws of reality fracture along with the ring. Death floods back into the world. The Erdtree's light begins to dim. The age of the Golden Order comes to a catastrophic end, and Marika, having accomplished what she set out to do, having broken the prison that bound her, even knowing it would bring disaster to everything she had built, prepared to face the consequences. But Radagon had other plans. Remember, Radagon and Marika shared a body. When Marika shattered the ring, Radagon was there, trapped in the same form, forced to watch as his other self destroyed everything he held sacred. Where Marika saw imprisonment and sought liberation, Radagon saw duty and sought to preserve it. Where Marika felt only despair at being the vessel, Radagon felt pride in serving the greater will. They were opposites in every way that mattered, and now they were about to enter into a conflict that neither could win. Radagon took control of their shared body. He picked up the hammer Marika had used to shatter the ring, and he attempted to repair what she had broken, to forge the shattered fragments back together, to restore the Elden Ring and with it the Golden Order that gave his existence meaning. But here's the tragedy. Radagon couldn't fix it. The Elden Ring wasn't simply broken like a physical object that could be hammered back into shape. It was fundamentally shattered, its essence scattered, its power distributed across the demigods who had claimed the great runes. No amount of skill or determination could remake it while those pieces remained separate. Radagon's efforts were futile from the start, and the greater will, or the Elden beast that served as its avatar, was watching. It saw what Marika had done. It saw Radagon's attempt to repair the damage, and it decided that both of them needed to be punished for this betrayal, this fundamental violation of the order they were supposed to maintain. So the greater will imprisoned them, not in a cell of stone or steel, but in something far more terrible. It crucified them on the Erdtree itself, suspended them on beams of golden light inside the very tree that Marika had caused to grow. It shattered their body as Marika had shattered the ring, broke them into pieces that could not move or act independently, and it trapped them there, still alive, still conscious, unable to die because death was sealed within them, unable to escape because they were bound by divine will, forced to hang there for an eternity, a broken goddess and a faithful champion locked together in punishment. This is the state in which the Tarnished finds them at the end of the game. Two beings in one body, crucified on light, shattered and imprisoned, Marika and Radagon both paying the price for what Marika chose to do. And when you approach them, when you dare to challenge the gods themselves, it's Radagon who responds. It's Radagon who takes up his hammer and attacks. It's Radagon who fights with everything he has to prevent you from accessing the Elden Ring, to stop you from claiming the power that he spent his entire existence serving. Marika, during this battle, remains silent and still. She doesn't fight. She doesn't resist. Perhaps she's too broken, too shattered by the greater will's punishment to act. Or perhaps she approves of what the Tarnished is doing, sees in them the possibility of change that she herself could never achieve. After all, she was the one who stripped grace from the Tarnished in the first place, who sent Godfrey and his warriors into exile with instructions to grow strong and return when she called them back. Was this her plan all along? to create warriors who existed outside the Golden Order's control, who could one day return and finish what she started. We don't know for certain. Marika's silence in those final moments is perhaps the most frustrating aspect of Elden Ring storytelling. We can infer, we can speculate, we can piece together fragments of her intentions from scattered clues, but we never hear her voice directly, never learn exactly what she hoped would come from shattering the ring. We're left to interpret her actions, to decide for ourselves whether she was a hero fighting against cosmic tyranny or a selfish goddess who destroyed the world rather than continue suffering in silence. Let's talk about what it must have been like to be Marika and Radagon, because this is where the true horror of their story becomes apparent, not in the violence or the wars or even the shattering itself, but in the daily reality of their existence, the moment-to-moment experience of being two conscious beings trapped in a single body. Imagine it. You are Marika. You're having a conversation with one of your children, discussing matters of state or family or whatever goddesses discuss with their demigod offspring. And in the middle of that conversation, you cease to exist. Not die, not fall asleep, but simply stop being present. Your consciousness is pushed aside as Radagon takes control of the body you share. And from his perspective, he's suddenly in the middle of a conversation he didn't start, dealing with a situation he has no context for, wearing a body that feels like his but isn't quite right, because when he's in control it takes his form rather than hers. Or you're Radagon, you're in Lernia, living with Renala, building a life with her. You have 3 children together. You love her, genuinely love her, find happiness in studying sorcery and building a family and existing as a person rather than just a god's consort. And then Marika calls you back. Or perhaps Marika decides it's time to reabsorb you. Or perhaps the greater will determines that the separation has gone on long enough, and you have to leave. You have to abandon the woman you love, the children you've raised, the life you've built, because you are not truly independent. You are an aspect of someone else, and when that someone else needs you to return, you have no choice. This is slavery of the most intimate kind. Your very identity is not your own. Your existence is subject to the whims of another consciousness that shares your form. You can't make plans without worrying that you'll cease to exist before you can carry them out. You can't commit to relationships because at any moment you might be replaced by your other self. You can't even be certain which thoughts and feelings are truly yours, and which are bleeding over from the other person you're forced to share a mind with. And it's worse for being one-sided in terms of power. The evidence suggests that Marika had more control over their shared form than Radagon did. She could suppress him, push him to the background, keep him dormant when she wanted to act independently. But could he do the same to her? We don't know. What we do know is that when Marika shattered the Elden Ring, Radagon couldn't stop her. He could only try to repair the damage afterwards. He was forced to watch as his other self destroyed everything he believed in, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. Think about the implications for their children. Michaela and Malenia were born from Marika mating with herself, with Radagon being the male aspect of that union. But what does that mean in practice? Were Marika and Radagon both present? During conception, did they take turns being conscious? Did one of them control the body while the other was aware but unable to act? The biological mechanics are confusing enough, but the psychological implications are nightmare fuel. And what did it mean for those children to have parents who were also each other? When Michaela went to Marika with a problem, was he also talking to Radagon? When Malenia stood before her father, was her mother watching through his eyes? The relationship dynamics become incomprehensible when you realize that every interaction with one parent was potentially also an interaction with the other, that there was no privacy, no separation, no way to have a relationship with one without the other being at least aware of it. The sculptor who discovered that Radagon is Marika went mad from the revelation, not just from learning the secret, but from understanding what it meant. He saw the truth of their shared existence, and it broke his mind. He couldn't cope with the implications of what he had learned about the nature of divinity, about the price that Marika had paid to become a goddess. And here's perhaps the most disturbing question. Did Radagon always exist as a separate consciousness, or was he created by the greater will or the Elden beast as a way to keep Marika in check? Was he always part of her, a masculine aspect that existed alongside her feminine primary identity? Or was he grafted onto her, forced into her being as a watchdog, a second consciousness installed to ensure she couldn't rebel without internal opposition? We know that the greater will has the power to split beings. We know that it can separate souls and bodies, can divide what should be unified. Is it possible that Radagon was created specifically to control Marika, to give her a partner who would always be loyal to the greater will even when she began to doubt? A perfect spy who couldn't be kept at a distance because he literally shared her thoughts? A jailer who lived inside her very being? If that's true, if Radagon was created as a tool to control Marika, then his devotion to the Golden Order takes on an even more tragic dimension. He was made to be loyal. His faithfulness wasn't a choice, wasn't something he decided based on reason or morality. It was his fundamental nature, the purpose for which he existed. And Marika had to live with this perfect embodiment of everything she had come to hate, had to share her existence with a being whose entire reason for existing was to prevent her from escaping. Alternatively, if they were always one being, if Radagon was always an aspect of Marika, then his emergence as a separate consciousness represents a splitting of the self, a fracturing of identity that came from the trauma of being made a vessel for the Elden Ring. Maybe Marika couldn't cope with the contradictions of her existence, couldn't reconcile her desire for revenge with her role as a goddess of order, couldn't hold both her trauma and her divine purpose in a single unified identity. So she split. She created Radagon to hold the parts of herself that could still believe in the Golden Order, that could still have faith, that could still serve without question. And by doing so, she guaranteed that she would never be free, because part of her would always be working against her rebellion, always trying to preserve what she wanted to destroy. Either way, whether Radagon was imposed from outside or emerged from within, the result was the same. Marika was trapped not just by the greater will, not just by the Elden Ring, but by her own nature. She was her own prison guard. She could never escape because escape required overthrowing herself, required destroying a part of her being that she couldn't fully separate from. The only solution was to shatter everything, to break the ring and break the world and break herself, hoping that in the wreckage something new might be possible. Chapter 8: The Meaning of Marika's Rebellion. We've talked about what Marika did, about the sequence of events that led to the Shattering. but we haven't fully explored what it means, what her actions were trying to say, what her rebellion represented in the larger context of Elden Ring's themes. At its core, Marika's story is about the price of power and the prison of godhood. She started from nothing, from a place of absolute vulnerability. She was a member of a persecuted minority, someone whose people were being systematically destroyed by those with more power. She couldn't protect her community. She couldn't stop the Hornsent from taking her people and stuffing them into jars. She was helpless, powerless, subject to forces beyond her control. So she sought power. She found the path to divinity and she walked it, accepting whatever price it demanded, because power was the only way to ensure that what happened to her people would never happen again. Power was the only language that the strong understood. If she could become strong enough, if she could become a goddess, then she could protect the vulnerable, could punish the cruel, could reshape the world into something better. But power didn't liberate her. It simply changed the nature of her captivity. As a goddess, as the vessel of the Elden Ring, she had incredible might, could reshape reality itself, could wage wars and build civilizations and decree laws that everyone had to follow. But she wasn't free. She was a vessel, a tool, a channel through which the greater will enacted its designs. Her power was always conditional, always subject to the approval of forces beyond even her divine comprehension. This is the fundamental horror of godhood in Elden Ring. It's not transcendence, it's not liberation, it's another form of slavery, perhaps the most complete form possible. Because when you become a god, when you allow yourself to become a vessel for cosmic powers, you lose the ability to be anything else. You can't just walk away. You can't retire from being divine. You're bound to your role forever, trapped in a function you can no longer escape, forced to be what others need you to be rather than what you want to be. Marika tried to work within the system. She built the Golden Order, established a civilization, created laws and customs that she thought would minimize suffering. She tried to be a good goddess, a benevolent ruler, someone who would use her divine power responsibly. But every choice she made created new suffering. Every attempt to protect some led to the persecution of others. Every war she waged to establish peace created new generations of people who had reason to hate her. The system itself was the problem, and she was the system. This is why Miquella's story from the reference document parallels Marika's so strongly. Both of them started from compassion, from genuine desire to help others. Both of them accumulated power in service of noble goals, and both of them became monsters in this process, creating new systems of oppression while trying to eliminate old ones, becoming what they hated in their attempts to destroy what they feared. But there's a crucial difference. Miquella, even as he abandoned his love and his doubt and his humanity, still believed he was doing the right thing. He died convinced of his righteousness, certain that his age of compassion would have been worth the price. Marika, on the other hand, realized the truth. She understood that she had become the very thing she fought against, that the Golden Order was just another form of the persecution she had suffered, that her ascension to godhood had accomplished nothing except to make her complicit in new horrors. And she couldn't live with that understanding. She couldn't continue to be the foundation for a system that caused so much suffering, even if that system also brought order and stability and prosperity to millions. because maintaining that system required her to remain imprisoned, required her to be the vessel, required her to sacrifice her own agency forever in service of a greater good that she no longer believed was actually good. So she chose chaos over order. She chose destruction over preservation. She chose to break everything rather than continue to be the linchpin holding it together. And there's something profound in that choice, something that speaks to the value of freedom over security, of authenticity over stability, of the right to make your own mistakes over the obligation to serve someone else's vision of perfection. Marika's rebellion wasn't just against the greater will. It was against the very idea that anyone, even a cosmic force claiming divine authority, has the right to take away your agency and force you into service. It was a declaration that slavery is wrong even when the master is a god, even when the chains are invisible, even when the cage is covered in gold and called a blessing. It was the ultimate assertion of self-determination. I would rather destroy the world than continue to be your puppet. This is why the game presents multiple endings, multiple possible futures for the lands between after you defeat Radagon and the Elden Beast. Because Marika's act of shattering the ring wasn't about replacing one order with another. It was about breaking the cycle entirely, about creating the possibility for something genuinely new. She couldn't tell her children or the Tarnished what to do with that possibility. That would just be another form of control, another imposition of will. She could only break the old system and hope that what grew from the ruins would be better, would be chosen rather than imposed, would be built on freedom rather than divine mandate. Of course, that's not what happened. The shattering led to war, to suffering, to the deaths of millions. The demigods, given freedom to determine their own fates, immediately started fighting each other for the great runes and the power they represented. The lands between descended into chaos, with ordinary people suffering the most as divine beings waged wars across their homes. Marika's liberation came at an enormous cost, paid primarily by those who had no say in her decision. Was it worth it? The game doesn't answer that question. It leaves it for you to decide based on which ending you choose, which vision for the future you think is best. You can restore the Golden Order, fixing what Marika broke and returning to the status quo. You can establish Ranni's Age of Stars, removing divine influence entirely and leaving humanity to stumble forward on its own. You can burn everything with the frenzied flame, deciding that existence itself is suffering and the only mercy is obliteration. You can create the Age of Order, imposing perfect divine law on the world. Or you can walk away entirely, becoming Elden Lord without changing anything, maintaining the Shattering forever. Each ending represents a different answer to the question Marika's actions posed. Is freedom worth the cost of chaos? Is it better to be enslaved in comfort or free in uncertainty? Should divine powers be allowed to impose order on the world, or should mortals be left to make their own mistakes and find their own way? These are questions without easy answers, questions that philosophy has wrestled with for thousands of years, questions that Elden Ring transforms into gameplay choices with profound implications. Chapter 9: The Final Battle. When you finally reach the Erdtree, when you burn your way through thorns and overcome every obstacle the world throws at you, you find them there. Marika and Radagon, crucified on beams of golden light, suspended inside the tree that was meant to be the symbol of an eternal age. Their body is shattered, broken like the ring they once held, barely held together by divine power. And as you approach, something shifts. The golden hair darkens to red. The body reconfigures itself. Radagon takes control, because Marika either cannot or will not fight you herself. And he attacks with everything he has, wielding his hammer with the skill of someone who has mastered every form of combat, who has studied warfare for centuries or millennia, who refuses to accept that the Golden Order he devoted his existence to defending could ever truly fall. The battle against Radagon is one of the most mechanically challenging fights in the game, but it's also one of the most thematically rich. You're not just fighting a powerful enemy, you're fighting a being who has lost everything except his faith, who clings to the Golden Order because without it he has no purpose, no identity, no reason to exist. You're fighting someone who cannot accept that the age he championed is over, that the goddess he served has rejected him, that everything he believed was a lie. And you're fighting someone who is also a victim. Radagon didn't choose this. He didn't choose to be bound to Marika, didn't choose to be imprisoned by the greater will, didn't choose to have his loyalty used against him. He's doing what he was made to do, being what he was meant to be, serving as faithfully as anyone could serve. And that faithfulness is destroying him, is making him fight a battle he cannot win in defense of an order that's already fallen. When Radagon falls, when you finally defeat him, something terrible happens. The body splits open, not metaphorically but literally, and from within emerges the Elden beast. This is the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring itself, the living avatar of the greater will, the cosmic force that has been pulling strings from the beginning. It's beautiful and terrible, a starry dragon-like creature that moves with otherworldly grace, wielding powers that dwarf even what Radagon possessed. And this is the game's final statement on Marika's situation. The greater will isn't abstract, isn't distant, isn't some vague cosmic force. It's right there, living inside her, using her body as a nest. She wasn't just bound to serve the Elden Ring. She was hosting it, carrying it like a parasite that had burrowed into her very being. This is what she was trying to escape when she shattered the ring. This is what she was trying to kill when she brought down her hammer. This is the true face of the god she served, the master who claimed ownership of her flesh and soul. The Elden beast fight is long and grueling, testing not just your skill but your endurance, your patience, your determination to see this through to the end. And when you finally defeat it, when you land that final blow that ends its existence, you're not just claiming the right to become Elden Lord, you're finishing what Marika started. You're killing the god that held her captive. You're destroying the cosmic force that turned divinity into a prison. And Marika's body, finally released from its burden, finally freed from the parasite that lived inside her, falls still, silent, no longer moving, no longer transforming, no longer forced to be anything other than what remains after everything else has been stripped away. Whether she still exists in any meaningful sense, whether consciousness remains in that shattered form, the game doesn't tell us. But she's free. The prison has been destroyed, the chains have been broken, and the price was everything. Legacy of the broken goddess. So what do we make of Marika in the end? What judgment do we pass on a goddess who broke the world, who initiated wars that killed millions, who created systems of persecution and then destroyed them along with everything else. How do we reconcile the woman who protected her people with unalloyed gold with the goddess who imprisoned her own sons in sewers? How do we understand someone who committed genocide while claiming to oppose persecution, who shattered divinity while still wearing its crown? The answer, I think, is that we don't reconcile these things. We can't. Because Marika herself couldn't reconcile them. The contradictions in her actions reflect contradictions in her nature, splits in her being that went deeper than just sharing a body with Radagon. She was simultaneously victim and perpetrator, liberator and tyrant, sufferer and inflictor of suffering. She contained multitudes, and those multitudes were at war with each other for her entire existence. This is what makes her one of the most compelling characters in Elden Ring, perhaps in all of From Software's catalogue. She's not a simple villain with clear evil motivations. She's not a tragic hero brought down by a single fatal flaw. She's a person, or a god, or something in between, who started from trauma and never fully healed from it, who accumulated power to protect herself and others, but found that power only created new traumas, who tried to build something better and ended up replicating the very system she sought to destroy. Her relationship with her children tells us so much about who she was. She loved them, genuinely loved them. She gave Godwyn the epithet the Golden and let him grow into someone worthy of it. She allowed Miquella to pursue research outside Golden Order fundamentalism, even though this represented a rejection of everything Radagon believed in. She planted a tree to heal a village where no one lived, just to honour the memory of a home that was destroyed long before her children were born. But she also failed them in fundamental ways. She couldn't cure Miquella and Malenia of their curses. She imprisoned Morgott and Mog for the crime of being born wrong. She sent Messmer to commit genocide and then sealed him away when his work was done, hiding him like a shameful secret. She either orchestrated or allowed Godwyn's assassination, letting her most beloved son be murdered to prove a point about the Golden Order's fallibility. Every relationship she had was marked by this same pattern of genuine affection, undermined by the impossibility of her situation. And Radagon, her other self, her internal opposition, her jailer, or her split personality, or her masculine aspect, or whatever he truly was, he loved her children too, but in a different way. He taught them fundamentalism, encouraged them to be strong, wanted them to serve the Golden Order with the same devotion he felt. He created the Golden Order Greatsword, a weapon that represented his attempt to unite sorcery and incantation, to be complete, to bridge the gap between different paths to power. He tried, in his own way, to be a good father, a good consort, a good champion. But he couldn't see that his loyalty to the system was part of what made that system harmful, that his faithfulness enabled cruelties he would never have consciously chosen to inflict. The tragedy of Marika and Radagon is that neither of them was wrong, but together they made each other's existence impossible. Marika was right that the Golden Order was a prison, that being the vessel of the Elden Ring was a form of slavery, that the system needed to be destroyed. Radagon was right that the Golden Order brought stability, that it protected millions of people, that destroying it would cause immense suffering. They were both correct, and both of them were willing to sacrifice everything for their contradictory beliefs, and because they shared a body, every choice one made was paid for by the other. This is what makes their final fate so painful. Crucified on the Erdtree as shattered by the greater will, imprisoned as punishment for Marika's rebellion, they spent what might have been centuries or millennia in that state. Two conscious beings forced into perfect stillness, unable to act, unable to die, unable to escape, each one aware of the other's presence and probably blaming the other for their fate. Marika resenting Radagon for trying to repair what she broke, for being the perfect servant she could never be. Radagon resenting Marika for destroying everything he valued, for betraying the greater will he served with such devotion. And the worst part? Neither of them could change. Neither could learn or grow or adapt. They were frozen in that moment of conflict, preserved like insects in amber, their final arguments suspended forever, their mutual resentment unable to evolve into understanding or forgiveness. They were stuck, together and separate, unified and divided, each one the other's torment, until a Tarnished came and ended it all by killing them both, and the god that lived inside them. What their story means for us. We've spent this entire night exploring the tragedy of Marika and Radagon, dissecting their choices, analysing their failures, trying to understand what drove them to become what they became. But what does their story mean for us? What can we take from this tale of broken gods and shattered worlds? I think the first lesson is about the dangers of seeking power to escape victimhood. Marika's entire journey was motivated by her experience of being powerless, of watching her people be destroyed while she could do nothing to stop it. Her ascension to godhood was supposed to ensure that she would never be that helpless again, that she would have the strength to protect herself and others from persecution. But the power she claimed came with chains of its own, and she spent her divine existence trapped in ways that were arguably worse than her original helplessness. This doesn't mean that victims shouldn't seek power, or that fighting back against oppression is wrong. But it suggests that power itself isn't liberation, that becoming strong enough to hurt others doesn't heal the wounds they inflicted on you. Marika became a goddess and still carried the trauma of the Shaman Village. She could wage wars and reshape reality, but she couldn't undo what had been done to her people. The power she accumulated didn't free her from her past. It just gave her new ways to be imprisoned. The second lesson is about cycles of violence and how easily victims become perpetrators. Marika knew what it felt like to be persecuted for circumstances beyond her control. She knew the horror of watching loved ones be taken and destroyed. She knew the helplessness of being seen as nothing more than raw material for someone else's purposes. And despite knowing all of that, despite having personally experienced those horrors, she created a golden order that did the same things to new targets. The Hornsent had persecuted shamans. Marika persecuted the Hornsent, the Omen, anyone marked by the Crucible, anyone who didn't fit her golden ideal. She replicated the exact structure of the system that had destroyed her people, just with different criteria for who deserved protection and who deserved suffering. This is how oppression perpetuates itself, how each generation of victims becomes the next generation of oppressors. Breaking this cycle requires more than just changing who holds power. It requires transforming the very structures that make oppression possible. The third lesson is about the cost of compromise with systems that are fundamentally unjust. Marika tried to work within the system. She became the vessel of the Elden Ring, accepted the role the Greater Will offered her, and attempted to use that position to make things better. And for a while, maybe she did make things better for some people. The Golden Order brought stability, ended certain forms of suffering, created a civilization where many people lived comfortable, prosperous lives. But that comfort was built on the continued suffering of those the system deemed unworthy, and Marika's participation in that system made her complicit in their oppression. Eventually she realized that the system itself was the problem, that she couldn't reform it from within, that the only way to end the injustice was to break everything and start over. But by the time she reached that realization, she had already spent centuries or millennia as part of the problem, had already committed atrocities in service of an order she would eventually try to destroy. Her final rebellion was necessary, but it came too late to erase what she had done while serving the system she eventually rejected. The fourth lesson is about identity and the prison of expectations. Marika and Radagon's shared existence is a metaphor, a literal representation of what it feels like to have your identity fractured by conflicting expectations and roles. Marika was supposed to be a benevolent goddess, a protector, a source of order and stability. Radagon was supposed to be a faithful champion, a defender of tradition, a pillar of loyalty. Neither of them could be fully themselves while also being what others needed them to be. The tension between their authentic selves and their prescribed roles literally split them in two. We all experience versions of this. We all have aspects of ourselves that we have to suppress or hide depending on the situation. Parts of our identity that conflict with each other, roles we're expected to play that don't match who we actually are. Marika and Radagon's story takes this universal experience and makes it literal, shows us what it would look like if the conflict between different aspects of self became so severe that they could no longer coexist in a single unified personality. And the horror of their situation warns us about what happens when we let external expectations define us so completely that we lose touch with who we actually are underneath. The fifth lesson is about the impossibility of perfect solutions. Marika tried to create a world without suffering. She sealed death, established order, built a civilization according to principles she thought would minimize cruelty. But every choice she made created new problems. Removing death created a world where people couldn't escape suffering, even when existence became unbearable. Establishing order created a rigid system that couldn't adapt to change. Building a civilization on specific principles meant excluding everyone who didn't fit those principles. And when she realized that the Golden Order wasn't working, that it was causing more suffering than it prevented, she shattered it. But that didn't solve the problem either. The shattering led to war, to chaos, to millions of deaths and immense suffering. Her solution was arguably worse than the problem, at least in the short term. There was no perfect answer, no choice that would make everything better for everyone. Every option came with costs, with trade-offs, with consequences that would harm someone. This is perhaps the most important lesson of all. Perfection is impossible, and attempts to create perfect systems often cause more harm than accepting imperfection and working within it. Marika's entire tragedy stems from her refusal to accept the limitations of her situation, her determination to find a solution that would end all suffering even when no such solution existed. If she had accepted that godhood came with limitations, that some problems don't have solutions, that being divine didn't mean having the power to fix everything, maybe she could have found peace within her constraints. But she couldn't accept that. She needed to be free, even if freedom meant destroying everything, even if liberation came at the cost of lives she was supposed to protect. Chapter 11. The Ending. And so, we come to the end of Marika's story. The end of Radagon's faithful service. The end of the Golden Order and the Age of the Erdtree. The Tarnished stands before their shattered body, having defeated them and the Elden beast that lived inside them, holding in their hands the power to reshape reality itself. The Elden Ring, or what remains of it, waits to be remade according to whatever vision the Tarnished chooses to impose. This is the moment Marika was working toward, though she couldn't have known exactly what form it would take. This is why she stripped the Tarnished of grace and sent them into exile with instructions to grow strong. This is why she shattered the ring, creating the possibility for something new. She couldn't free herself. She couldn't imagine what should come after the Golden Order. She was too trapped, too damaged, too conflicted within herself to envision an alternative. But she could break the old system and hope that someone else, someone outside the divine hierarchy, someone who had experienced death and struggle and the full range of mortal existence, might be able to build something better. Whether the Tarnished does build something better depends on which ending you choose, which vision for the future you think is right. Do you restore the Golden Order, fixing what Marika broke and returning to the status quo, deciding that despite its flaws it was better than chaos? Do you follow Ranni's path, removing divine influence entirely and leaving humanity to stumble forward on its own, embracing uncertainty over the false security of divine guidance? Do you embrace the frenzied flame, deciding that all existence is suffering and the only mercy is burning everything to ash? Do you create Goldmask's Age of Order, attempting to perfect the system rather than replacing it, finding a way to keep the Golden Order but remove its capacity for human error and cruelty? Each ending represents a different answer to the questions Marika's life posed. Each one is a judgment on whether she was right to do what she did, whether freedom is worth the cost of chaos, whether divine order can ever be truly benevolent, or if godhood itself is fundamentally a form of tyranny. The game doesn't tell you which answer is correct. It leaves that decision to you, makes you complicit in whatever comes next, forces you to grapple with the same impossible choices that drove Marika to her desperate rebellion. And Marika herself, she's gone, silent, released finally from the prison of divinity, freed from the burden of being the vessel, escaped from the endless conflict with Radagon. Whether her consciousness survives in any form, whether she would approve of what you choose to do with her broken world, we'll never know. She did what she needed to do, broke what needed to be broken, and then faded away, leaving others to deal with the consequences of her actions. There's something both tragic and appropriate about that ending. Marika was never able to imagine what should replace the Golden Order. She could only destroy it and hope. Her final act was one of faith, a belief that something better might grow from the ruins even though she couldn't envision what that something might be. She trusted others to build the future she couldn't create, to learn from her mistakes, to find solutions she couldn't find. It was an act of humility, from a goddess who had learned the hard way that divinity doesn't grant wisdom, that power doesn't confer the right to determine everyone's fate, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is step aside and let others try. Or perhaps she simply had no choice. Perhaps the shattering was an act of desperation rather than deliberate strategy, a drowning person flailing for air rather than a calculated rebellion. Perhaps she destroyed the world not because she believed something better would follow, but because she couldn't endure her imprisonment any longer, because even chaos and destruction were preferable to continued existence as the vessel. Perhaps there was no deeper meaning, no greater plan, just a broken goddess lashing out at her chains in a final moment of defiance. We'll never know for certain. That's the genius and the frustration of Elden Ring storytelling. It gives us pieces, fragments, hints and implications, but the full picture remains obscured, subject to interpretation, open to endless debate and discussion. Was Marika a hero or a villain? Was her rebellion justified or selfish? Was the Golden Order worth preserving, or did it deserve to be destroyed? These questions don't have definitive answers, and different players will come to different conclusions based on their own values, their own experiences, their own understanding of what justice and freedom mean. Conclusion. The god who broke herself. As we come to the end of this long night's tale, as we close the book on Marika and Radagon's tragic story, what are we left with? What do we take away from this exploration of divinity gone wrong, of power that becomes a prison, of a goddess who broke the world just to break free? I think what stays with me most is the profound humanity of Marika's story, despite her being a goddess. Because underneath all the divine trappings, underneath the cosmic scale of her actions, Marika's journey is fundamentally human. It's about trauma and how we carry it. It's about the ways we replicate the harms done to us even when we swear we'll be different. It's about the impossible search for justice in an unjust world, the quest for freedom in systems designed to constrain us, the desperate need to be seen and known and valued as ourselves, rather than as vessels for someone else's purposes. Marika was a girl from a persecuted minority who watched her people be destroyed. She gained the power to ensure nothing like that would ever happen again. She built a civilization, established an order, created laws and customs meant to protect the vulnerable. And in doing all of that, she became a tyrant, a persecutor in her own right, a goddess who enforced suffering on new victims while claiming to oppose suffering itself. She was heroic and monstrous, liberated and imprisoned, both victim and perpetrator. She contained all these contradictions within herself, and they tore her apart. And in the end, when she could no longer bear the weight of what she had become, when the contradictions became too severe to contain, she chose destruction. She broke the Elden Ring. She shattered the world. She destroyed everything she had built, knowing it would cause immense suffering, because continuing to be the foundation for a system she no longer believed in was worse than any alternative. It was a choice born from desperation, from rage, from grief, from 1,000 different emotions all crashing together in a moment of crystallized resolution. Was it the right choice? That's for you to decide. But it was undeniably a choice, perhaps the only real choice Marika made in her entire divine existence. Everything else she did was constrained by her role, shaped by expectations, filtered through the lens of being the vessel for the Elden Ring. But in that moment, when she raised her hammer and brought it crashing down, she was acting purely for herself, doing what she needed to do without regard for consequences or responsibilities or divine purpose. She was being authentically herself, even if that self was shattered and desperate and driven to destruction. And there's something powerful in that, something that resonates beyond the specific details of Elden Ring's lore, because we all know what it's like to feel trapped, to be stuck in situations we didn't choose and can't escape, to wear masks and play roles and be what others need us to be, until we forget who we actually are underneath. We all understand the desire to just break everything, to destroy the systems that constrain us, to shatter our prisons even knowing that the rubble might bury us. Marika's story takes that universal feeling and makes it literal, gives it form and consequence, shows us what it would actually mean to follow through on that desperate impulse. Radagon's part in this tragedy is equally important. His loyalty, his devotion, his unwavering faith in the Golden Order, these weren't flaws or weaknesses. They were genuine virtues taken to impossible extremes. He believed in service, in duty, in maintaining the structures that brought stability to millions of lives. He couldn't see that loyalty to a fundamentally unjust system makes you complicit in injustice, that serving something greater than yourself becomes slavery when you lose the ability to choose whether to serve. He was being the best version of what he thought he should be, and that made him unable to support Marika when she needed him most. Their final conflict, Marika trying to destroy while Radagon tried to repair, was a microcosm of the larger philosophical questions the game explores. Change versus stability, freedom versus security, the needs of individuals versus the needs of systems. Neither of them was wrong in any absolute sense, but they were incompatible. And because they shared a single body, their incompatibility became a prison neither could escape. The image of them crucified on the Erdtree, shattered by the greater will, waiting for someone to either restore or finish what they started, is one of the most haunting in all of gaming. Two gods reduced to a broken shell, suspended in divine light, their conflict frozen in that moment, unable to move forward or back, just hanging there as testament to the cost of rebellion and the price of loyalty. When the tarnished finally reaches them, when you finally face them in battle, you're not just fighting for the right to become Elden Lord, you're giving them release. You're ending their suffering. You're finishing the work Marika started when she shattered the ring, completing the cycle of destruction and making way for whatever comes next. And maybe that's the ultimate message of their story, that sometimes destruction is necessary, that sometimes the only way forward is to break what exists and build something new from the pieces, that sometimes freedom requires sacrifice, requires being willing to lose everything, requires shattering yourself along with the world you're trying to escape. It's not a comfortable message. It's not one that suggests easy answers or simple solutions. But it's honest in a way that many stories aren't, acknowledging the real costs of change, the genuine sacrifices required to break free from systems that hold you captive. Marika the Eternal, Queen of the Lands Between, vessel of the Elden Ring, the god who broke herself to break the world. And Radagon of the Golden Order, loyal champion, faithful servant, the god who tried to repair what his other self destroyed. Together, they represent the contradictions inherent in seeking justice through power, the impossibility of being both free and divine, the tragedy of being unable to reconcile what you are with what you wish to become. Their story doesn't have a happy ending. There are no happy endings in Elden Ring, but there is meaning in their struggle, value in their suffering, lessons in their failures. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's all any of us can hope for, that our struggles mean something, that our suffering teaches something, that our failures pave the way for others to succeed where we could not. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the darkest corners of the lands between, for letting me tell you this story of broken gods and shattered worlds. If you found value in this exploration, if these long night conversations help you drift off to sleep or give you something to think about in the darkness, I'd really appreciate if you'd hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. There are so many more stories to tell, so many more shadows to explore, so many more nightmares to examine in the gentle light of narrative. Until next time, rest well, and remember, even gods can break. Even divine chains can be shattered. Even in the darkest prisons, there's always the possibility of escape, even if that escape comes at a cost you could never have imagined paying. The question isn't whether the price is too high. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Whether freedom is worth more than security. Whether being yourself matters more than fulfilling the role you've been assigned. Marika answered those questions with a hammer blow that shattered the world. How you answer them is up to you. Sweet dreams, travelers. May your rest be peaceful, and may you wake to a world where your chains are your own to break. Good night.